I'm going to tell you about 5 deep sky astrophotography targets for beginners. Hi everybody, how's it going? My name is Nick and welcome back to another astro exploring video. If this is your first time here, then this YouTube channel is all about helping people on their astrophotography journey. So if that's something that interests you, then consider subscribing. Now then, I chose these 5 deep sky astrophotography targets because of their accessibility to everybody, no matter what equipment you're using, whether that be an 18mm kit lens with a DSLR all the way up to a big telescope. Now I should stress that this is just my list that I've compiled based on my astrophotography experience. You may have other targets in mind, and if you do, then consider dropping a comment down below to help others out that are just starting out in the hobby of astrophotography. But please do so in the spirit in which this video is intended, which is geared all towards beginners. And I would also like to point out that these targets are focused on people living in the northern hemisphere like myself. So if you're from the southern hemisphere, then this video may not be for you. I didn't want to recommend southern hemisphere targets because I've never imaged a southern hemisphere target and live in the southern hemisphere, and so I didn't really feel like I could offer much value to you there. So as I move through each of the 5 targets, I'm going to be talking about what the target is, where to find it in the sky, and at what time of year it's available to image, along with some sample images that I've taken through my journey in this hobby. So first up, and this is not really going to be a surprise to anybody in the astrophotography world, is M42, the Orion Nebula. Probably the most recognizable deep sky object in the night sky, and probably in the most talked about part of the winter sky here in the northern hemisphere. The great thing about the Orion Nebula is that it's not only a really stunning target to image to begin with, but it's also visible to the naked eye just below Orion's belt, so it's really easy to find for a beginner. And depending on what equipment you're using, you can actually frame multiple targets within the field of view. So here is a shot with my 3-inch refractor telescope, my Skywatcher 72 ED. And here you can see the Orion Nebula, and you can also see the Running Man Nebula next to it. So that's actually 2 targets within the field of view. So that's 2 for the price of 1 at that focal length. And here's another image that I took of the Orion constellation. And this is an hour's worth of data using the Canon 50mm f1.8, the Nifty 50, on top of my Star Adventurer with my modified DSLR. And here you can see the Orion Nebula again and the Running Man Nebula, but this time, because of the wide angle shot, we've also got the Flame Nebula, the Horsehead Nebula, and Barnard's Loop. And so in this image alone, that's 5 deep sky targets in one field of view. So that's 5 for the price of 1. So maybe I should have called this video 10 deep sky astrophotography targets for beginners. Anyway, if you are going wider than a 50mm lens, which is perfectly reasonable to do with the Orion constellation, then you can also get the Rosette Nebula into that field of view as well, and you can add a 6th deep sky object into your field of view. Honestly, the possibilities are endless with this constellation. Now, from my latitude here in the UK, which is about 51 degrees north, the Orion Nebula can be found pretty much from the beginning of December or earlier if you're willing to stay up later in the night, right up until probably the end of February. You can image it after that, but it starts to get really quite low in the sky at that point. So unless you've got a really clear view to the horizon, it's quite difficult to image any time after the end of February. In terms of finding the Orion Nebula, nobody needs me to tell them where Orion's belt is. So locate Orion's belt in the sky and look just below the first star in the belt, Alnitak, and that bright object that you can see underneath that looks like a star, that is the Orion Nebula. Okay, moving on to target number 2, the Andromeda Galaxy, M31, our galactic neighbour, our neighbouring galaxy. Now, under the right conditions, the Andromeda Galaxy can also be seen with the naked eye, but you really need quite a dark sky in order to be able to find it with the naked eye. However, it is really easy to find even if you can't see it. It's really very close to the bright star Merak. I think that's how you say it. Stars have such weird names, I've got no idea how you pronounce half of these. And so if you can find the star Merak, then you'll be able to find the Andromeda Galaxy, especially if you've got a longer focal length. Just make sure Merak is in the field of view, take a test shot, and you'll be able to find Andromeda from there, no problem. The great thing about the Andromeda Galaxy is that it is absolutely huge. It is massive, and so regardless of your field of view, you will be able to pull out a reasonable amount of detail. Here is an image that I took of the Andromeda Galaxy that actually ended up being featured in the BBC Sky at Night magazine back at the beginning of 2020. And this image was cropped slightly, but not too much. So you can see just how much of the field of view the Andromeda Galaxy takes up, even at a moderate focal length. So even with a camera lens, taking a picture of the Andromeda Galaxy is still totally worthwhile. And I don't know why, but sometimes when I'm imaging a galaxy, I can't help but wonder if somebody in that galaxy is taking a picture of our galaxy, the Milky Way. So there's essentially a person taking a photograph of a galaxy in which another person is taking a photograph of that galaxy, and I don't know, that just kind of fascinates me a little bit. Anyway, I digress. Now, as well as being easy to find, the Andromeda Galaxy is also available to image most of the year round in the Northern Hemisphere, to be honest with you, depending on where you're located. However, it is best imaged sort of after September time if you are willing to stay up really late, up until around late February, March. Because between those months, that's when it is going to be highest in the sky, and naturally we want to try and shoot objects in astrophotography when they're higher in the sky because we're going through less turbulent air in the atmosphere. Okay, on to target number 3, and that is the Pleiades, also known as M45 or the Seven Sisters. Now, this is probably the most famous open star cluster that we have in the Northern Hemisphere. Most people have heard of the Seven Sisters, even if they haven't heard of the name the Pleiades itself. And again, this is visible to the naked eye, and you're probably beginning to see a pattern here with the objects that I've chosen. So it is really easy to find. You don't need that much of a dark sky to be able to see the Pleiades, but it certainly does help. So the part of the sky that you'll want to start looking in to find the Pleiades is in the constellation Taurus. If you can find the constellation Taurus, then because it's visible to the naked eye, you should be able to spot a little cluster of stars in the night sky, and that is the Pleiades. However, if you're still struggling, then the Pleiades is also really close to the bright star Aldebaran. So if you can find Aldebaran, then you'll be able to find the Pleiades, no problem. And from my location, it is best imaged sort of at the end of November time, right up until the end of February. And here's an image that I took with my 3-inch refractor and DSLR last year. This is about 3 hours worth of data using 2-minute exposures. And this is the cropped version, but just so that you can see what it looked like straight off the camera after being processed, this is the uncropped version of that. So it's quite a large object in the sky. Now, if you want to image the Pleiades with a small camera lens, say 50mm or less, then the great thing about that is that you can also fit target number 4 into the field of view, and that is the California Nebula. And here's an image that I took using a 50mm lens that has, you can see the California Nebula in one corner and the Pleiades in another. No prizes for guessing where the California Nebula gets its name from. It clearly looks like the state of California and is a great image to target because, again, it is massive. Even at 50mm, you can see that it really stands out in the field of view. But here's an image that I took with my 3-inch refractor. This is about 4 hours worth of data, again 2-minute exposures using my modified DSLR and the Optolong L-Enhance narrowband filter. Now, finding the California Nebula could not be easier, especially if you're using a low focal length camera lens like a 50mm, because you can get the if you can get the Pleiades into the field of view in one corner, then you'll be able to get the California Nebula into that same field of view, as we've already talked about. It's located in the constellation of Perseus. So if you take the Pleiades and then find the bright stars Capella and Merfac, as you can see in Stellarium here, if you draw a triangle between all three and then look sort of dead center of that triangle, then that is where the California Nebula is. It is a trickier one to find of the ones we've talked about so far because it's not visible to the naked eye, and you do need to do a little bit of star hopping if you're using anything longer than probably an 80mm lens. However, hopefully this guide is helpful enough for you that you should still be able to find it no problem. And at my latitude, it's best imaged kind of late November right up until the end of January. It's a fairly short window here, but if you've got a clear view to the horizon, you might be able to stretch out your window longer than that. And last but certainly not least is the North American Nebula, NGC 7000. Like the California California Nebula, the North American Nebula, is a huge emission nebula in the sky. And if you have the right focal length, you can also get the neighboring Pelican Nebula in the field of view as well. So that's again 2 for the price of 1. The North American Nebula is a summer target, so pretty much from the end of June right the way up until the end of September is a good time to be imaging the North American Nebula. And finding it could not be easier. If you locate the constellation Cygnus in the night sky and find the bright star Deneb, if you take a test shot of Deneb, then you're pretty much guaranteed to have the North American Nebula, or certainly the Pelican Nebula, within your field of view, and you can make your fine adjustments from there. It is an absolutely massive target, so you don't need to be hugely accurate to be able to find it, and it's 2,500 light years across. It's absolutely massive. And here's an image that I took with my 3-inch refractor again. And this isn't cropped at all. So you can see just how big it is even at a moderate focal length like a 3-inch refractor. And once you've managed a successful imaging session and want to learn how to process your astrophotography, then go and click into this video right here, which will be a really quick guide on how to process the North American Nebula in Photoshop. Please remember to like, share and subscribe to the channel. My name is Nick and you've been watching Astro Exploring.